take another look at this hoof that I described on Facebook yesterday. This hoof is now pretty old. You can see that the where the frog was, it's completely shrunk up. The heels are touching together, and when we look underneath, it's completely shrunk across and gone inward. The water content of this capsule has disappeared, and so that's why it's shrunk. And because there is no coffin bone in here, then there's nothing to keep this bit apart. Now, some people actually put a bolt through there while this is still fresh, and it stops that contraction of the horn going in. Let me just show you this one here, where I took the capsule off and I then put the coffin bone in, and this one has actually stayed pretty much similar to what it was when it was fresh. So the coffin bone has actually kept the horn from shrinking up on itself. Let's just go back to this one here, because what we were looking at this part there, and I'm just going to zoom in for you on that part to show you. And I know it's really hard to see, but this is the part that we are literally looking at. And just on visual, it doesn't particularly look very different, but can you just about see, I might try and zoom in a little bit more, can you just about see that there is an increase there? There's a little blob there, and that was the part that was like a piece of glass when I took the capsule off, and then I ran my fingers down here and down here, where the sides of the frog, the collateral grooves, and that part there, I could have easily have ripped a glove on it, and I was very surprised, and that was the purpose of my video yesterday. What I've done now is I found the capsule and wanted to have another look at it, because there was lots of communications and conversations about, was it bar, was it frog, was it a stone that had worked its way up through the sole and had started to work its way through here. I've had another good look at this, and I can't see any evidence of a stone or any foreign object that's been pushed up in there from the underneath. And I'm still not sure what that is. Let me just show you. It was about here. About here is where it is. And the only difference that I see on this sample is if you actually look at the bars that come down through here, there seems to be a bit of bar that's coming out round here and round here through here. Can you see that little shape there? Whereas on the other side, we don't seem to have that same sort of shape. The bar does seem to be reasonably well defined through here, and it's not coming out anymore. Now, I don't know if that has any significance to what we're seeing with that sharp part. And the other thing I don't really understand is that when you look at these bars, you can actually see the tubules of the bars coming through here. And those tubules are still coming down, right down here, even though we are 3/4 of the way down where the frog is. So this is the frog apex here. And if the bar is supposed to terminate shorter than that, then what's all this here? I don't quite understand that. When we turn it round and we look on the inside, we can see where the bar is terminating. Here is the insensitive lamella of the bar up through here, which stops about here. And the same on the other side, which is where we've got that sharp bit. And yes, that bar looks like it really is terminating here. And what's quite nice is I can actually see a change in the colour as well. Can you see how light this is through here? There's a distinct pattern. Almost looks as if the bars are throwing a pattern through here, a pigment. So I'm not quite sure about that, but let's, for argument's sake, say that the bar actually ends here. Now this is such a distorted sample, so without its frog and with the capsule so shrunken in, it is very hard to get your bearings. But let's just say, for argument's sake, the barred end there. Then what on earth is that there, which is a good 4 centimeters away? And if you look there, that's quite a good example of where that has got this little sharp lump through there. And it has shrunken up and it has moved quite a bit. So this wouldn't really be a very good sample to study as it is, being so old and so dry. But I just felt I needed to go back and have another look. Well, let's ask ourselves, what internal tissue would we find at that point there? So let's have a look at another sample that I've got. This is actually we're going to actually look at a sample that's been dried, and we can have a look and see where the coffin bone sits and where the other internal structures sit at that point there. Let's first of all get our measurements. So I'm just going to put the probe through so that we know exactly where that point is. Okay, we're going to have to rely on a measurement here because I cannot get the probe through. But I'm just going to measure this now, and then we can then work out where that little point is. Now, first of all, I want to give a shout out to all my Patreon supporters who have donated to help me with my studies and my dissections, because I was able to buy this really flash steel ruler with some of your donations. So thank you so much. All right, now let's have a look. If we measure there, so we are looking at to that edge there, it's 20 centimeters. That means that from that edge there, just get my bearings, we would be right, so that would be there, so we know exactly where we are. And if that's where that little mark, that's where that sharp bit was. Now, looking at this external sole, if we were looking at this in real life, now I'm just going to do it at this. I'm going to show it to you like this, because can you see how concave it is? And sometimes when you look at a picture or a video, you can really lose yourself whether something is bulging out or bulging in. So there's your concavity there. And so still get in mind that this is concave, and this is the remnants of the frog. Here's the frog apex here, and the remnants of the frog. At that point where that little sharp bit was, if this was a live horse, I would have said that's where the bar terminated, on the outside. And why would I say that? Well, that's where it seems to terminate in terms of these tubules, these bar tubules through here. And we have a similar termination on this side. However, when we turn it over, the bar tubules terminate way back there. So I'm really not sure what's going on here. But let's have a look at a sample and see where the internal tissues would be in relation to that sharp little piece. This is another real dried up crusty old sample. It was one of my earlier sections, and what I did is I sliced it, and I so badly wanted to keep it because it was my first one, that I sliced it and then I buried it in salt to try and draw all the moisture out of the tissues. And so it's like salt dried, like salted meat almost, like they would have done in the olden days, put everything in salt to preserve it, and that's what I've done. Now this is the actual sagittal slice, so the coffin bone is here, which is P3, and the horn there and the sole here, and you can just about see the frog is up through here, and this is the junction here between the frog and the sole. I know this is a much bigger hoof, and you know, we're not really comparing like with like. We just need to get a similar place as to where we are with this one here. So I'm just going to have a quick look, and it's probably just off the halfway mark, that little sharp part. But we've also got to bear in mind that that sample of that dark hoof is very desiccated and will have shifted in appearance and shrunk. But just for argument's sake, so we said that that was 2 centimetres in. And let's have a little look here and see where 2 centimetres would take us to. So 2 centimetres is going to take us to about there. So look, this is all very, what we would call Heath Robinson in England. I've got no exact measurements here, and it's all you know, about this and about that. But I just wanted to give you a bit of an idea as to where we're looking at. And yes, this is a dried up, crusty old sample, but look at where the coffin bone sits. Look how much tissue there is underneath the coffin bone. There isn't a lot. So that means to me that that sharp part on that hoof, there wouldn't have been a lot of protection to the coffin bone at that point. Now, if it was a little bit further back, then I suppose you could say there's a little bit of protection from this tendon that's running through here, which is a deep digital flexor tendon, if it was running here. But then in that case, that sharp bit would be rubbing on that tendon and causing a massive tendinitis, in my opinion. So I think it must have been a little bit further down and a little bit just underneath the coffin bone, around about here. Let's just have a look at this sample and also get our bearings with this one, because if we compare where that little mark was on this one and try and extrapolate it to this one, what we can do is we can say, well, where is the coffin bone sitting? And I did have a photograph of that original capsule with its original coffin bone in, and you could see that there was a reasonable gap in there. So even if that little hard bit was right down in there, I know it's really hard for you to see on the video, but can you see that there is plenty of room in there? I'm not 100% sure what tissues we would have under this part here, and I'm also not 100% sure that I've pushed this coffin bone into the capsule in exactly the right place. So we've got an awful lot of variables that are playing against us here. But is this answering our question about that little sharp part? Is it bar? Well, looking on the outside, I could have thought it was a little bit of bar poking up. I really don't know. Looking at the inside, I'd have said no, it can't be bar, because bar terminates down here. It doesn't terminate way up there, so it can't be bar. And then what problems could it have with the horse? Well, it probably would have problems with the coffin bone, but we couldn't see any evidence of any wear or any damage to the coffin bone in the still photograph. So even though I've gone back and had another look at this and studied it intently today, I still feel as though there are more questions that I'm asking myself, and I'm still coming back to my own thoughts and asking you that same question. If you look at the underneath, could you say that there was embedded bar in a sample like this? And how would you know? And what does embedded mean? I suppose it means that instead of it hitting the ground and being worn off, it's actually working its way back up into the foot. Or instead of the bar actually bending over the sole, which is probably what we've got here, where we've got the tubules coming down, and then if this is bar, then it's bending and making its way over the sole. Why would it want to go up higher into the hoof capsule. Wouldn't it be better for it just to grow down and across? Wouldn't that be a more physiological thing for the horse to cope with, rather than having bar that actually works its way up into the hoof? But these questions are my own ramblings with my scientific mind, my critical mind, and I really look forward to having some collaboration with you on this, as to, now you've got a little bit more information from me, albeit a bit of a crusty old dried up sample. I hope that it gives you a chance to have a think about this a little bit more, and go back to the textbooks, go back to any information that you've gathered over the years, and have a think about this for me and for all of us, so that we can come to a decision on what we might think it is, and what we could do about it, most importantly. Other comments were that maybe this actually could be normal, that we have these little oddities going on in the hoof capsule, and that this might not actually be a problem. Gosh, look, we're never going to know. This is one hoof from a horse. We don't know anything about its history. We don't know anything about its diet. We don't know why it was put to sleep. We can't get anything from this particular sample. We have nothing to work on except with what we've got in front of us. And that's what we have to do. It's almost a bit like being in forensic science, when you're given something and you have to make assumptions and you have to apply critical thinking as to what you're seeing. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope that it's given you some food for thought. And if you enjoy my videos and you feel that they are of value to you, please consider supporting me on my Patreon account, because every little helps. Just $1 a month would really make such a huge difference to me, because it means that I can buy scalpels, I can pay for my new lamps, I can just do so much more if I've got the materials to work with. So thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to speaking with you all again.